For those of you who might wonder, Ann Austin, who went with us, couldn't be here today, but she sent a little PowerPoint with her reflections. So I asked if they could display them for us.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Good morning. I am Ann Alston, member of St. John's Episcopal Church in College Park, Georgia, along with my nephew Richard Bolton IV and Chanson Smith. We were part of the Episcopal Pilgrimage Group that journeyed recently to Charleston, South Carolina in January 2024. The outside entrance to the museum was so memorable, with a pool of water on the landing showing body shadow displays of the enslaved. In another area, there was a strong and tall copse of palm trees representing the strength of the enslaved. Upon entering the International African American Museum, there were several areas to visit, so alluring, so free and open, so modern, yet with sad tales and images of a moment in time of suffering and struggling.
This particular video really moved me because I just kept imagining the ships just pouring into all of these different places. Like it was it was so many places. I'm just thinking of a ship pulling up here, my people in chains. A ship pulling up here, my people in chains. Another ship over here, in chains. And then the South Carolina one just really stuck out because that's the exact place where the ship came in. And my people were chained just like animals. Like, just because you didn't know us, we didn't speak your language, we could do well in the sun, and you chained us to bring us over here to help you to not give us anything. That don't seem like a fair exchange. So this piece really, really, really stuck out to me. And it hit home. Like, it hit really, to my bones.
One of these areas that caught my attention immediately was that of family search genealogy tools. Knowing that genealogy tools now exist at the International African American Museum is comforting knowledge to have. I have been in quest of tools to support me in my research of my maternal grandmother's family for several years. It's a free resource, and I am grateful for the opportunity to pursue my dream. Symbol of the suffering souls of enslaved African Americans. Above this memento in wood, it reads, "The nobility of a soul that has suffered to the point almost of erasure, and still it struggles to be whole, present, giving. offered by Zora Neale Hurston in her book Barracone, The Story of the Last Black Cargo. After the museum visit, Richard and I decided to visit the City Gallery. Here we found portraits of the enslaved African Americans with professions. Psalm 147, verse 34 and verse 6. He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. He counts the number of the stars and calls them all by their names. The Lord loves the lowly, but casts the wicked to the ground. As I reviewed the photos taken of the enslaved African Americans portrayed in their professions, I could only think of the verses above in their profundity. I felt so proud looking at these portraits, to the point of tears in my heart. In each one I could see the giftedness and pride that God had working within them to lift the spirits. They so minuscule, yet so enormously valuable. They were spinners, butlers, cooks, brick masons, carpenters, mastiffs on ships, carriage drivers, silversmiths, seamstresses, shoemakers, nurses, rice planters, storytellers, ironers, river guides, washerwomen, fishermen, hairstylists, and so on. Portrait of a fisherman, a hairstylist, a tanner. And here, a ironer, a brick mason, and a shoemaker. Here we find for sale announcements for a tanner, a millinery, and others, in private as well as public sales. Isaiah 40, verse 29. He gives power to the faint and strengthens the powerless. These words from Isaiah indeed are ones that I feel sure the enslaved African Americans treasured, ever fearful of being sold away from family life or maltreatment or death, when all they had were these talents from the Lord. They who trusted in the Lord received new strength and didn't get tired. They grew in these jobs and were rewarded with refuge in the Lord. Thanks so very much to the organizers of this pilgrimage to Charleston, South Carolina. This journey was so meaningful to me and to my nephew and friend. Echoing Audrey Nesbitt's words, where do we go from here? My suggestion, we could start by visiting the morning or after church education formation groups at each of the participating Episcopal churches, in addition to St. Bart's, to pass on our stories. This is Ann Alston.
Like I said, that presentation was from Ann Austin, who couldn't be with us today.
Shirley, can you speak into the microphone?
It's not turned on.
Is there? I thought he did. I'll try harder.
Yes, it worked.
We had someone from All Saints who wrote this that I'm going to read to you for their newsletter, which tells you another person's view. And then after that, any of the rest of you who would come and share your experience on the pilgrimage, why you did it, what it meant to you, what impressions you came away with. And if there's time at the end, I'll share a lament or two that were written by a couple of people that I did a previous pilgrimage with.
Shirley, keep it real close to your mouth, otherwise it won't come through.
Okay. Epiphany Pilgrimage to Charleston, January 5th through 7th, 2024. In Trevor Noah's most recent stand-up comedy special on Netflix, he says one of the top 5 things white people love is museums. That may be true. And I think people of all races, and particularly black people, will appreciate the International African American Museum in Charleston. People from 6 metro Atlanta churches came together in Charleston for a pilgrimage, the focal point of which was a trip to the International African American Museum, IAAM, pronounced I am by some, recalling the times when black protesters carried signs saying, I am a man. Led by parishioners Shirley Lee and Becky Corrali and the Reverend Canon Dr. Angela Shepherd, the rector of St. Bart's, this pilgrimage also included parishioners from Holy Trinity, St. John's, St. Catherine's, Church of the Epiphany, and All Saints. We were a multiracial group ranging in age from 9 to 85. The insights and opinions from the children and the diversity of parishioners enhanced the experience for us all. We packed a lot in from Friday evening to Sunday morning. We had some quality experiences together and started to form relationships that we hope will continue to grow. We stayed at St. Christopher Camp and Conference Center, which is at the tip of Seabrook Island. This is a wonderful place which provided reasonable accommodations, meals, and meeting space where we had several group gatherings and worship services, including Compline twice and our own Epiphany service on Saturday morning. The museum itself is a treasure, and I commend it to anyone. Like the Legacy Museum in Montgomery, it's impossible to take it all in with just a couple of hours. I definitely plan to return to both museums in the future. Don't miss the ground level, which is all outside. Everything created by the architect and the landscape architect was deliberate and has meaning. It is built at the site of Gadsden's Wharf, where so many enslaved Africans first set foot on this continent, and from inside you look across the water towards Africa. The wall on your left is full of the original names of the people who were captured and brought over. The wall to your right shows the names they were forced to take when they got here. One of the museum's purposes is to honor the untold stories of the African American journey at one of our country's most sacred sites. It's also home of the Center for Family History, a groundbreaking resource for the study and enhancement of African American genealogy, with connections to Africa and the African diaspora. It is available to all who want to look into their genealogy. When we gathered together as pilgrims on Saturday evening for a debrief and reflection time, everyone took it very seriously and shared observations from the day. It was noted that it is impossible to miss the incredible inequality of wealth that persists to this day, as we took the 1-hour drive from our conference center through the posh, white, gated Seabrook Island community, through poorer, mostly black parts of Charleston, and into the very gentrified area of downtown Charleston, where the museum is. We were challenged, and we pondered and prayed about how we can start to change the systems that created the disparity and segregation. Some of us took the time to visit the Angel Oak, the largest live oak tree east of the Mississippi. It's 300 to 400 years old, and it continues to grow and thrive, even expanding itself through the fence which was put up to try to protect it. Upon reflection, I see the tree as a symbol. What else has been around over 400 years and continues to grow to this day? Both racism and the resistance to it, and the persistence in love that still emanates from people who are oppressed. Which side will we water? On Sunday morning, a bunch of us attended St. Mark's Episcopal Church, which is an historically Black Episcopal church with a diverse congregation. The first thing you see on their website in big letters is "Beloved Community. Together we thrive." Though it was founded in 1865, the National Episcopal Church did not recognize it officially until 1965. We were warmly welcomed and embraced by virtually every single church member and clergy person that day, and we were treated to a fabulous sermon by a young Black female aspirant, Shawana Gillings, whose gifts in preaching and ministry are already a blessing in the world. A quote from Shirley Lee sums the weekend up well. It was moving, memorable, and inspiring, and I look forward to other opportunities to gather with fellow pilgrims on this journey towards social justice and reconciliation. The bonds created in these experiences are stronger with people I have known only a short time than with some people I have known a very long time. One of these pilgrims we were all touched by, and with whom we were looking forward to having many more conversations and experiences, was Althea Dillard of St. Catherine's. We are all heartbroken over the news that she died just 11 days after our pilgrimage. In memory of this most incredibly passionate and loving person, we must continue the hard work towards healing and justice. Ann Stewart Pierce. Charlie Suba or Gina, would you all like to start with your reflections, or do you want some more people to do that first? Sarah? All right. Yeah.
I don't know what I'm going to say, but I wanted to say that one of the most impressive parts that I was moved by at the museum was the African Gallery. And you walk into that gallery, and on the far wall, on the east wall, is a very large lion and other animal-shaped mask. And a quote from Chinua Achebe in very large letters, and it says, "Until the lions have their own historians, the history of the hunt will always glorify the hunter." And that's Chinua Achebe, a very famous African author. So there were a lot of things that were just really beautiful about being with all these people that were exploring this history, and the comparison between the Legacy Museum in Montgomery, this museum, is there was so much celebration of culture. It really was an uplifting place to be. After we had finished the Saturday tour, some of us, 4 of us, went to the McLeod Plantation in the morning instead of going to church. And then at least one other person I saw kind of came after church to tour the place. But we had an archaeology graduate student who led our tour. And it was a really wonderful way to hear her view of how things changed in the landscape. She started talking about when the indigenous people lived on the James Island and the changes that were made to support different narratives, including the times after the Civil War when the lost cause narrative was encouraged, and the plantation was developed as a way to have people come and experience how wonderful life would have been on a plantation. Well, it's now owned by Charleston, the land, and they have these wonderful tours that really educate you on the history. And there's a building that has bricks that were made during, during antebellum time. And one brick that we were shown has child's fingerprints on it that just really demonstrates the level of stolen labor. And I think that's all I want to talk about right now, but thank you all. So who's next? Sarah.
I'm going to try to be brief because I know our time is limited, and I would just reiterate the value of being with other pilgrims and hearing their stories and their experiences. The guide that we had who started us on the outside of the museum was really, really helpful in terms of explaining the different structures, and especially so you saw it in Alston's video there, but it's this extensive area. It's kind of like a reflecting pool, and it has the outlines of the slaves. It's kind of similar to what they would have been experiencing in the hold of a ship. And so it's like they're slaves lying down, and it's an extensive area. It reaches out to the wharf, and that was really telling to see that. But especially, I would say just hearing what motivated other people to come to the pilgrimage and how they responded to what they saw. I found the museum a little overwhelming in terms of, like, once we got inside, our guide explained how the layout and everything, but it was a lot, and it kind of reminded me of the Legacy Museum the first time we went. It was like a little overwhelming, a lot of information. So I don't know if they're gonna change any of that, but mainly it was just being with other pilgrims and hearing their experiences, especially the young people, and talking about, and I agree that the deliberate stealing of skilled people from Africa and the exploitation it's just, it helps to hear all the stories and to be reminded of what was stolen. So thank you. Anybody else?
Just to build on what Sarah was saying, the thing that I took away most was I was really impressed with actually the museum and the way it was organized, because it was set up for wherever you were with the story. And so when you walked in, behind you was a sort of conventional chronology of, the last however many number of years since the enslaved were taken and brought all the way forward to the present day, Black Lives Matter and stuff. So it was if you wanted that sort of history, which is very conventional, chronological cause and effect, you could go that way. But I think the part that Sarah was talking about that felt maybe overwhelming to her was, if you walked forward, there were these more experiential displays where you could have different entry points into the story. So I'm not going to summarize all of them. The one that moved me the most was one about praise houses, where they actually had a praise house set up just a little bit taller than me with a video inside. And the thing that moved me was that somewhere in my peripheral vision, I've always known about these structures. Like I've seen them so many times. I've seen the evidence of them. They've been, as they say, hidden in plain sight. And yet I've never understood their significance. And so it just kind of opened my eyes to the sort of courage and steadfastness and faith of the people. And I will say too, I really encourage people to go because my whole morning was spent, I went through the chronology first as, an academic. I thought I should do the chronology. It took me 2 hours, like the whole morning I was reading every single panel, which I don't know why I did that, but then it was amazing. I'd never seen it put together that way before. We went to lunch and I was like, Suba, I want to go back. So we went back, the 4 of us went back. And that's when I went to the other part and had a completely different experience. I've never been to a museum before where I had 2 such completely different experiences of the same story. So I'll stop talking now.
But I didn't understand what a praise house was.
So it's a small structure, I understand, that dates back to the days of slavery, where on a plantation, the slaves would have been given a small structure where they could pray. And it was one of the only spaces in the entire plantation that was theirs alone, where they could go and they could express themselves without oversight, without, encroachment by slave masters and whatnot. And so they took full advantage of these very small structures, that tradition still lives on today. But it's what I've seen evidence of is that you see in so many, even today in small communities that are impoverished, you still see these very small structures. Sometimes even, I think in fact, not even with windows. They would have been extremely warm, extremely, not necessarily what we understand as comfortable, but for the people, it would have been this escape. And I just, I can't stop thinking about that use of space. And anyway, I can't quite put it into words. But that was,
Charlie,
yeah.
let me just, if you'll say this in the mic, but there has been one on the lawn at Glenn Memorial Church on the Emory campus. It's on Clifton Road, and it's almost at the turnaround. I don't know if it's still there.
It's gone now.
Is it still there?
Yeah, it's an artist, an African-American artist who's doing this floating exhibition on praise houses, and she's doing a lot of research on it.
Well, I went to a funeral there, and I saw it, and I felt the same way. All of a sudden, I thought, oh, that's what that is.
So people are talking about an African-American artist, don't know her name, who's been setting up praise houses. Charmaine Minothy.
Yes.
And was recently at the Carlos Museum, right? There was an exhibit. I didn't make it to that, but it's a whole history of, maybe it just made me think about how privileged we are to be able to have so much space where we're worshiping. I don't know how to put it into words. But I still think about it all the time, like what it must have been like, how it must have been amazing to have a space that was yours at that time, or that was your community, but also...
It was a real sanctuary, though.
Yeah, it was, but it was just very different from what we think of as that. So anyway, did anyone else want to just...
I have a question then, for you or for anyone. So there were kids on this trip. How did the kids enjoy the museum and the trip? You don't have to speak for the kids, but
Come on, Jean.
Come on, Jeevan.
You don't have to come up if you want to just...
I didn't have anything planned for this, but so the kids, I can't speak for all of them because I'm a little older than some of them, but I can say that I was pleasantly surprised at how approachable it was for both me as an older kid and the younger kids like my brother, because it seemed like there was the chronological stuff in the background that really asked for a very deep look into just how, like, the cause and effect of, like, they were brought, the enslaved people were brought over, and then their rights were taken away, and then they earned them back, and just the cycle of gaining rights for them to be taken away, to be gained again, to be taken away again. But I think for a lot of younger people, it's a little harder to have that analytical view of the entire thing. And so I think when you go to the front, and it's just, you can choose what part of the story you focus on. You can focus on the Gullah Geechee people, or you could focus on the praise houses, or you could focus on the various ways in which people were trapped and taken away. You can focus on what their names were before and after they were enslaved. And so I think that there was just a place for every single type of person in that museum to find a part of the story that not only they could understand, but a part that that was tangible for them. So like a younger person who might not be able to deal with all like the breadth of the entire story can just take a small part, like maybe the praise house, because this is a praise house. It's not the same type as that one, but it is a place where people come together to pray. And so I think that can be a way for anybody of any age and any background to connect with the story.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Awesome. Thank you, Chief. The thing I would like to say, the museum was just outstanding, but the other part of this to me was that we were on a pilgrimage, and that you can visit a museum and get so much out of it, but doing it with a specific purpose of that and growing your faith, your relationship with kindred spirits, all of that was just so wonderful. And Angela, thank you for the things that you did to kind of ground us and bring us back to being able to integrate some of this. The other thing, just from my heart, I want to say about Althea Dillard, that she said to us, and I think she'd been saying that she was dying, and we were like, no way, no. And but the Saturday night when we all met together to talk about our experiences, she kind of held court. I think, Angela, you might have said that, and challenged us all. I mean, I felt like we got a gift from her, and I feel like I can't ignore that. I mean, but a gift to what are we going to do, along with her twin sister Audrey, who Ann Alston quoted. But just what a meaningful experience it was. Charleston is just rich in history. I mean, it's great. But anyway, I wanted to speak specifically to the pilgrimage and just how wonderful that was. So, thank you.
Would you be willing to give your rector's perspective of the trip?
Okay, yeah, one at a time.
The rector's perspective. Well, first of all, I just want to thank the Dismantling Racism Ministry team for, having the courage to organize this and to say yes to actually going to visit this museum because it was new. Accepting, and not a surprise though, the aspect of the spiritual component. I really did enjoy and appreciate offering a Eucharist on the morning of Epiphany. And I feel like it was quite a profound experience that night. It has already been mentioned when we were gathered to share what Althea spoke to the group. It was just, and then when I saw the email that she died, my mind immediately went back. And I identified that as an epiphany moment for us all. And was unbeknownst to anyone, somewhat of a farewell address, because she was so passionate about us doing the work. So I hope that there will be other pilgrimages that we're able to sponsor here from St. Bartholomew's. It really wasn't that difficult, I don't think, to put everything together. A couple highlights for me. There was a display of Jonathan Northrup's book, 12 Years a Slave.
And that's one of my favorite movies. I think that they did an excellent job of depicting all the details regarding enslavement of people. Written as his autobiography, written in the 1700s. So if you've not seen it, I encourage you to watch 12 Years a Slave. I went into the Old Slave Mart, and I've always appreciated times when I can actually touch things that were touched by people from so long ago. So this Old Slave Mart, I think, was built in the 1850s. So there's one wall that's exposed from then. So I went over and placed my hand on it and just closed my eyes to be in silence, to thinking about the people who made that wall. And there were two other places. Once one of the people who worked there saw me doing that. He said, well, let me show you two other places where there are bricks. Someone has already mentioned the fingerprints. So there are two other places where the bricks that are there, and you can see the fingerprints of the people who were enslaved, left behind as evidence of their work. On a cheery note, I was really happy to go with Ann Austin and her nephew and his friend, and also our guide, Walter. How could I forget Walter? And the seafood restaurant had soft shell crab tacos. That was a delightful surprise. It's really a really delightful surprise. So, and then also went to the McLeod Plantation on Sunday after worship, and also enjoyed worship. Another thing, just from the perspective of an African American, taking note of the ways in which the focus on skin color showed up in the museum, and also from our guide, who several times said that he was the darkest one in his family, and seemed to take, I don't know, some sort of pride in that. I don't know what it was, but several times I noticed in the museum he pointed out to me some of his family. They belonged to these different social groups. And so I read it, indicated that they created a cemetery back then, but it was only for people of light complexion.
Oh, wow.
So I said something to him about it, you know. And so your family was practicing discrimination. I see that no dark-skinned people were allowed in the cemetery. So he basically just said, well, it was, you know, that's just the way it was. That's true, some of that, that's just the way it was. However, it did not make it right. Yeah. And the fact that the residuals from these things still exist and still show up amongst us today. So it's important to actually know your history. Know your history, because there is a direct thread from the past to the present. Things have not gone away. Some things are clear. Some things have simply morphed and changed. But again, thank you to the ministry, and let's see what we might do again someplace else.
Thank you.
I think some of you remember Gail DaCosta. She emailed Sarah and me while we were at the museum and said if we went back into the family history section, we could see that there was a plaque honoring her family that had, you know, escaped from slavery and become strong abolitionists and teachers. And we got to worship with her on Sunday morning at St. Mark's. And that's not the church she's currently worshiping at, but they were pretty glad to see her back. And I told her, I said, I think you need to come back more often. They're so happy you're here. Suva or John, anybody else want to say something? Then,
No, people want to join you for future things, the ministry, how would they get involved?
Oh, thank you.
For the live show.
The Dismantling Racism Ministry, in essence, began about 5 years ago when St. Bart's did its pilgrimage to Montgomery. I was out of the country at the time and didn't get to go on that one, but as a result of how moving it was for people. We began meeting weekly back then to read and study, and in the ensuing 5 years, we've done 2 sacred ground groups, we've read books, we've done book studies, we've seen documentaries.
Got a protest?
Yes. Charlie was very strongly persuasive that more of us need to be willing to use our voices and get into good trouble, as John Lewis says, and take a stand. And I'll add my personal feeling that we can no longer afford a silent majority. There's too much at stake, too much effort to bury the truths that some of us are now discovering. I don't know how many of you see my Facebook post, which has become my platform, but I'm currently reading Dr. Carol Anderson's book, White Rage, because when Suba recommended that we go see the documentary at Emory a few weeks ago, entitled The Cost of Inheritance, which made a case for reparations, one of the panelists was Dr. Carol Anderson, and so I had heard the title of her book but never bought it, and did. And the latest startling thing I read was that Ronald Reagan, who was supposed to be such an esteemed president, actually created a drug-addicted society by using, moving cocaine into California and distributing throughout the world to fund the Contras in Nicaragua. I mean, when you read some of our history, I mean, I said one other time, if after reading her book you can take pride in your whiteness, you're a sad case. But I was going to say our dismantling racism meetings are every other Thursday. We do it via Zoom, and we continue to notify one another of educational opportunities, advocacy opportunities, training opportunities, and
Protest.
And I was going to say, just if you want to just get on base camp, you know, as part of dismantling racism, then you can just see what's going on, and you don't have to come to, I mean, every other week is a lot of times, a lot of meetings, but you can see what we're thinking about, what we're reading, what we're doing, and jump in at any point. So
we're meeting this Thursday.
Base camp isn't open to everyone,
I know
Becky.
you just get an invitation.
No, because vestry stuff is confidential, so.
We're in a different group.
We have our own group.
Okay.
So if you let
Okay.
any, Shirley, me, know that if you want to, we'll
Okay.
make sure you get on.
Okay.
We just have to get an invite.
Go to the church office.
And the other thing I want to say, John, I know what got me into this was Sacred Ground. I mean, it was such a wonderful opportunity to give me the background. I knew I wanted to be involved, but it was just such a wonderful way to feel like, okay, I've got some stuff I can bring with me and
Kind of a true history rather than the whitewashed history that most of us were taught earlier in life. I mean, it's astounding.
I'm doing it right now.
That's what I heard. That's what I heard.
And it is amazing.
Yeah.
We're halfway, isn't that right?
Yeah. And it is very nice to be able to talk about it and process it with other people. And even, I'm now doing it the second time, co-facilitating with someone. And to hear a new discussion about it is still bringing thoughts and ideas and feelings that I didn't have the first time.
We hear this over and over again about Sacred Ground, and people have gotten involved through that program.
Can you tell us what it is?
So, like, we have some readings and some videos. Oh, you want me to
There's
use?
homework, lots of.
You want me to use the microphone?
Yes, please.
Is it a dice?
The Episcopal Church put it together, and there's a website, and you go each week, and There's usually a video, maybe an hour or so, or a couple of small ones that add up. And there's some reading to do. We've got a couple books we're reading, and they're arranged nicely thematically, and then we come and talk about what we've read.
It's an 11-session course.
Yeah, there are 11 sessions. The way we've organized it is we started the first session by having a meal together. We met over at All Saints, and we're going to do the same thing at the end and have a Eucharist together, which was a super wonderful movie last time, so I'm sure it will be this time also.
On that subject, Ann Stewart Pierce said that she would send an invitation, and all of us who have done Sacred Ground previously could go to that April 20th, I think, luncheon and discussion. And for those of us who did it before there were 11 sessions, we might want to go back and do session 11, or maybe even review session 10, and then sign up and have lunch with them at All Saints.
We would honestly love to have you.
Well, thank y'all all so much.
Yeah.
It's been a great session.
Yeah.